Guest. He's been on here multiple times. I'm very excited to always have him on because he tells the truth and doesn't sugarcoat what the heck is going on in this country. This is Professor Richard Wolff. It's Richard D. Wolff at YouTube, and then it's rdwolff.com. It's WOLFF. Make sure you remember that. He does have a new book out. It's Understanding Capitalism. Professor Wolff, always a pleasure to have you on, and thanks so much for always being a good friend to the program.
My pleasure, Rob. Glad to be here.
So let's kick this around. Donald Trump won the election. Why did Donald Trump win the election when, the Democrats supposedly were the political party of the working people, and they just folded up like an accordion? We saw people in unions go and vote for Donald Trump. Asian people, black people, Hispanic people, women voted for Donald Trump. What the hell happened in this election?
Well, I think the best way to get it across is to say that, with my grandmother said this to me, you can't beat something with nothing.
Right.
And what she meant, I think, was illustrated in this election. Let me begin by putting on my hat as a professional economist. The economy of the United States is in big trouble. It has major problems. The mass of the people know it. They live it. They see it in the prices of eggs in the supermarket. They see it when they pump gas in their car. They see it everywhere. And no one seems to have it under control, and nothing seems to be happening to fix it. Okay? That's the reality. And when you read in the newspaper that the people who lead the country don't understand why the mass of people don't see the good economy, it's because the economy isn't good for them. And they shouldn't see something that isn't there. I'm with the people, not with the professionals who are trying to sell something that really is unreal. Once you understand what the real economic problems of the country are, and let me tell you what they are very quickly, so people get it. We now are one of the most unequal economies in the world. Over the last 30 to 40 years, the top 1 to 10% of people have gotten much, much richer. That's why we all know names like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, because they're in there all the time. You see their faces. They're spending billions on this. They're spending billions on that. Meanwhile, you cringe when you go in the supermarket. You're worried about paying the taking out the money so your kid can go to college because you know that a bachelor's degree barely helps you get a decent job, et cetera, et cetera. So we are now very, very unequal. I mean, let me give you a statistic. In 1945, at the end of World War II, the United States was the least unequal country if you compare the United States with Europe. Today, the United States is the most unequal economy compared with Europe. I mean, that's a fantastic change in a relatively, historically speaking, short period of time. So one of the big problems is that the so-called American dream is out of reach of most Americans. They can't afford to put a down payment and take out a mortgage. They can't have that house, which is supposed to be a sign of making it in America. Let me give you another statistic. The only way the American family has avoided a collapse in its standard of living over the last 30 years is by going into debt. If it had to rely on its wages, it would be way less than what it is now. You have to borrow for your house, a mortgage. You have to borrow to buy your car. You have to borrow to go to college. And you have to borrow for your daily expenses using your credit card. So the level of debt is off the charts for American people. And so what happens is, they can keep up their spending for a while, But after a certain point, you can't even make that monthly payment, which is just a little share of the debt you have accumulated. And Americans are full of anxiety about their debts. Americans consume more anti-depression and anti-anxiety pills than any people on the planet. And that's not because there's something weird about Americans. It's because of the economic situation that we actually face. Why am I telling you this? Because Donald Trump came along and he did two things. He talked about the bad economy. He talked about how bad it had become. And that at least showed a politician who understood, or at least talked the talk, of an economic system in trouble. What he proposed is nonsense. So his achievement was on being the champion of people suffering. He did that, and he did it way better than Kamala Harris was able to do it. And then he comes in with his proposals. And let me try to give him something there too. He's going to protect the American people. He is going to do something about this awful economic situation. He's going to build big walls. Now, that's a very dramatic image. A wall against the invasion of the immigrants, and another wall against the invasion of Chinese products. One will be a steel wall that they can't climb over, although they have been climbing over it fine. And another one to prevent the Chinese goods from coming in. And guess what? They've been coming in fine without all of that. But it's a good image. I'm building a wall to protect us. What did Kamala Harris do? Nothing. She went down to Texas and she said she wasn't so keen on immigrants either. Okay, that's like a Me Too. That's not dramatic, but it isn't anything different. And she also, bashed the Chinese. Okay, so there's nothing there to make you excited about Kamala Harris. She's not doing anything more than Mr. Trump did, and he at least makes a big splash out of it. That's what my grandmother meant when she said, he's got two dramatic walls. She got nothing. There's no drama. No, her things are all little things. She's not going to tax tips. That's nice, but that doesn't affect our economy. And by the way, what Mr. Trump said, deporting immigrants or tariffs against Chinese goods, that's not the American problem. That's not going to solve. Even if he did it, it won't solve anything. So what you got is a guy who says he cares about people whose economy situation is bad and proposes two things that don't make any difference but look good on TV against a candidate who hasn't got anything looking good. She smiles a lot, which is nice. She doesn't seem as kooky as he is. But here's another thing he had going for him. Americans associate conventional politics, the politics of the George Bushes, of the Clintons, of the Obamas, of the Bidens. This is your same old political, show. And Mr. Trump, because he says things he shouldn't, because he acts and speaks in a way that we're not used to from politicians, he was able to get across, I'm different. I'm therefore something you can maybe hope will do something. I think a lot of the people who voted him in were sick and tired of the conventional politics. They don't want another Bush. They don't want another Clinton. They don't want another Biden. And Kamala Harris said she was part of that group. And that, I think, hurt her terribly. So those are the reasons, I think. But I'm afraid that if you look closely at what Mr. Trump proposes, it makes no sense at all. I'll give you a couple of examples. A tariff. Let's be sure we all understand what a tariff is. It's just a name for a particular kind of tax. It's a tax on anything produced in another part of the world that's brought into the United States to be sold to an American company or an American consumer. So think of it as a tax. And by the way, here's what it was used to be called: an import duty. That's what it was called in the first century of the United States. The word tariff is just a substitute for the word import duty. Okay, who pays the tax? American. If you're an American importer, or let's say, for example, you're a wholesaler who brings French wine into the United States to be sold in your local liquor store. Okay, he's the importer. The American pays $10 to the French wine grower, and then he has to pay a tariff to Uncle Sam, because it's the American government that imposes the tax on Americans. You know, the Republican Party used to be called the anti-tax party. But here it is imposing a big fat tax on the American people, calling it a tariff, and having the president say over and over again, I'm going to hit the Chinese with a tariff. The Chinese don't pay the tariff, you idiot. The Chinese have nothing to do with the tariff. A tariff is imposed by the U.S. government on U.S. citizens who pay it to the U.S. Treasury. The Chinese are spectators to all of this. And Americans don't seem to understand that if Mr. Trump goes through with what he's promised to do, raise the tariffs against the foreigners who are cheating us, you know what that's going to do to the inflation? Shoot it right up. Because every importer is going to pass the cost of that tax paid to Uncle Sam onto what we have to pay for the imported vehicle, the imported wine, the imported you fill in the blank. So Mr. Trump has got a real problem. If he delivers on the tariff, he's going to make the inflation worse. But that's how he got elected. So if he does that, he'll be shooting himself in the foot in terms of economics. So how he's going to resolve this crazy contradiction, I have no idea. But here's what's worse. He has no idea either. Let me give you a second example. Let's say he carries through on his promise to deport 10 million undocumented immigrants. Okay, Rob, I'm going to put on my economics professor hat. We are a rich country of 330 million people.
Yeah.
There is no way on God's green earth for 10 to 12 undocumented immigrants, and that's what the Department of Homeland Security says we have. And these are 10 to 12 million people who are among the poorest people on earth, who left their village, who left their school, who left their home, who left their language, and left everything behind them to come to the United States. There is no way they caused the problems of a 330 million rich economy. That's ridiculous. Having a big deportation of these poor people is horribly cruel, violates, as far as I understand, every religion which says you are to welcome the stranger, you are to welcome the poor, you are to welcome those in need, which is what these people are. All right, put all that aside. Now let's take a look at the economics. Right. What do those 10 to 12 million people do?
One, wage jobs.
That's right. They work in the shittiest, pardon me, the poorest jobs in the country. Everybody knows it. They're the people working on the construction site.
Right.
They're the people picking tomatoes or lettuce or, all of that. They're the people in the back of the restaurant washing the dishes. That's what they do. And because they are undocumented, employers love them because
Right.
you can rip them off. If it's Friday afternoon and everybody's coming to get their paycheck, the employer says to the undocumented worker, "Excuse me, Jose, we don't have a check for you. We ran short of money this week, but you come and work next week and we'll be sure to have your money for you next Friday." What is Jose going to do? Is he going to go to the police and say, "They're stealing my money"? He doesn't dare. Is he going to go to the labor department and say, "I'm being abused, they're violating labor law"? No. You know why? Because he's undocumented. And if he goes anywhere near the United States government, he risks being deported.
But doesn't this, just to interject, Professor Wolff, doesn't this also hurt the middle class? Not saying that they're going to work these jobs. Obviously, they're not. But it's inflicting issues with wages because they're paying these poor people $2, $3, $4 an hour, and
Right.
it's bringing all the wages down.
That's right.
And
Not to
that's on the Democrats and the Republicans.
Right. That's correct. But I'm about to go show you even further. One of the reasons you pay, let's say, $3 for a head of lettuce at the supermarket is because the lettuce grower is ripping off undocumented immigrants. If those people are gone, if the Trump administration deports them, then he's going to have to pay an American citizen to pick the damn lettuce. And he's going to have to pay him more, and he can't rip him off because if he doesn't have the pay envelope on Friday, that citizen is going to go to the police and say, "Hey, I'm being held up by my employer," and he's going to have to hire a lawyer. Long story short, the cost of growing lettuce is going to go up. And you know what that means? You're going to pay more. Here again, Trump, if he deports, worsens the inflation in America. He's driving prices up because replacing undocumented immigrants with American workers means the wages that the employer has to pay go up.
So, Professor Will, where is the balance here? That you can't let everybody and their brother in the country, but you also want these people in to do the roofing jobs or pick the lettuce, the tomatoes, the list goes on and on. There's got to be some sort of balance there as far as the immigration and also the economics of this.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, when we've had these kinds of insoluble problems, we have as a nation come up with big, bold plans. Let me give you an example. At the end of World War II, when the war was over, the millions of Americans in uniform were brought home from Japan or from Europe. They took off their uniforms, and now they were civilians and they needed a job. But we were just coming out of a depression and there were no jobs. At the same time, there were millions of people who had gotten jobs producing the uniforms, the guns, the bullets, the planes, the bombs. We didn't need them anymore, and they got laid off because we weren't fighting the war. So you had many millions of people with what? They had just made the sacrifice of going into the army, earning next to no money, risking their lives. Many of them came home wounded. Many of them came home with mental problems, like we always do in a war. And so the government decided to do something massive.
WPA.
Well, no, that was in the 30s. What happened in
Okay.
the 40s was something called the Marshall Plan. And here's
Okay.
what it was. The United States took our money, tax money, and gave billions of dollars to the Europeans and to the Japanese to rebuild their economy. The British, the French, the German, the Italian, and many more. And the deal was, we'll give you the money, but you have to use it to buy from the United States the tractors, the cranes, everything you need to rebuild your economy. And why did we do it? Because it gave jobs to the millions of demobilized military who could now have a job producing what the Europeans could afford to buy because we gave them the money. Okay, here's what we need. We need a Marshall Plan. And what the Marshall Plan will do is go to all Americans who are unemployed now and say, we're giving you a job. As of Monday morning, you're hired. We will find interesting things for you to do. Ecological projects, cleaning the swamps and the greening of America that we keep talking about, providing activities for the elderly who are becoming a bigger and bigger part of our population, providing daycare centers so that young parents can have a job now that we need to have both of them working. So and there are about 10 million Americans right now, give or take, who are unemployed. So the first priority, the Marshall Plan, give them a job. Second priority, take all of the immigrants that are here now and give them a job also. So they are not on the public dole, they're not on welfare, they will have we'll give them a job too.
But to be fair, Professor Wolff, we do have an issue with housing, whether it's immigrants or Americans. If we keep bringing these people in, I agree with you. We do need these people, but we can't have it at the pace that they're coming in right now because the country is almost like it's
hear me out.
But
Hear me out. When you ask the question, what are these 10 million domestic Native Americans who are unemployed we're going to give a job to? What are they going to do? And what about the 10 million immigrants? What are they going to do? Well, first thing,
the tax
build housing. Come on, that's what we'll do. We'll build housing for these people, and we'll do it in communities that want housing to be built, that are willing to accommodate these immigrants. That's what we will do. And we can do all of that. We are a nation. We have the machinery, we have the land, we have the lumber, we have it all. And if we did that, then the Native Americans wouldn't be worried that the immigrant's going to take my job. We've taken care of that. You got a job. The government will give you the job. And then we have the right to say, we're going to suspend immigration for 2 or 3 years until we've got this all worked out, till we've got the jobs, the housing. This is a way of solving the problem. So we won't have Native people hating the immigrants. We won't have immigrants being hated and reacting. Look, Mr. Trump never explained how deporting these people would be good for the United States. And I just showed you how it would be very bad. It would worsen the inflation, and it wouldn't solve anything. These are the poorest people literally on the planet. And it's not good for us to be the country that the whole world watches throwing poor people out of the country, putting their children in cages. Come on, do we really want to continue being in that position? And again, deporting those people doesn't help our society. It just doesn't. The FBI reports that the percentage of crimes per person of immigrants is lower than the percentage of crime per person of people born in the United States. And no one should be surprised of that because they're undocumented. They're not going to commit a crime because unlike you and me, we'll get a lawyer and we'll go into court and we'll bargain and then they'll be deported in 10 minutes. They have no recourse. They can't afford a lawyer. They don't want to go into court. They're not going to commit a crime.
I think people are worried about assimilation. I think that's the big thing. But I do agree with you with the job issue. I think that is important. We're always going to need immigrants. We're always going to need people to do these jobs that we've been speaking about. Americans have been spoiled to not want to do these jobs, even the people that are unemployed. So I do agree with you. I want to fixate a little bit more on the debt in the deficit because this is the big problem. as we move towards the middle of the interview here. No candidate really spoke about any kind of solution to the debt in this country throughout the election. I'm really worried about this because they've already cut rates for the 10-year bond. All right. Then we have the yield that's going to hit 6%. We're going to have to refinance the $17 trillion. That's only half of the debt in the next 2 years. So a lot of that was at 0.2, if you're correct, for the where that went. And they're going to be pumping up to 4% now. So the gig is over. And we got Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense, and interest on the debt. And no one wants to do anything. And I know you alluded to this at the beginning of the interview, but the day of reckoning is already here. So that's my issue. I don't want to go back to the immigrant issue. I know that that's a tax base if we do give them jobs, but we have more people on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. You brought this up. People are getting old in this country. They're not getting younger. The tax base is getting lower. And all the spending between Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Israel, the list keeps going on and on. The defense budget, we don't even know what the hell that is as far as money-wise, because they just have unlimited money. They just did an audit and they failed for the 7th year in a row. So sorry to ramble, but this is, I feel like, more scarier to me than this immigration issue, which could, get fixed in 10 seconds.
Yeah, let me explain a little bit. Our political system produces this result, and Americans have to understand that if you don't want this kind of debt to be hanging over you, and most of what you said I agree with, it sits there. It now costs us $700 billion a year in interest on the debt. That's going up every year for the reasons you pointed to. That's getting close to the defense budget, which means if you take the defense and the interest, that's the overwhelming bulk of our government's money. So that's why they don't have the money to help us fund students, or they don't have. You can't keep
never
up
cut the defense budget. That's a fixation for them. Never.
Right.
They'll cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid because they really don't give a crap about those people. Defense, they will never touch. That's their bread and butter. I'm sorry to interject, Professor.
No, that's been true. And they dare not stop paying the debt either. They have to pay the interest on the debt, or else they can't keep borrowing. Nobody will lend to the United States government if they don't pay that debt. So they've boxed themselves into a corner. But our politicians do that because, remember, the politician who decides this year to borrow a lot of money can spend it and look good to his constituents. Only years later does the bill come due to repay that debt. So what we've got is a system that we don't punish the politician who makes the decision to borrow, and so they all do that, and they build their careers like that. That's has been the story of this country for a long time. And you're right, we're coming to the end of playing that game, but it will take a dramatic act. It will take a president, and it might be this one, who will simply announce, okay, I'm not going to give old people a pension. Well, let's think about that. I would say that there are 30 to 40 million families in the United States who depend on that Social Security, maybe more. Right. You're gonna really take away what they've come to depend on? You're gonna not pay them back the money they put into Social Security every year of their lives when they saw what was taken out of their check to go into FICA, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have a revolt in your country. You're going to have people like in other countries saying, wait a minute.
Look what they did in France.
Yes.
They were going to move it up a year, and they revolted, and they
revolted, and that was canceled. He couldn't do it because the country came to a halt. Absolutely, that stuff is going to happen here. I want to remind people, because when the government borrows, it never asks the question, where does the money come from? because they're desperate to pay for what they're doing. They have to borrow the money. Okay, the number two creditor of the United States, who has lent more money to Uncle Sam than anybody else. The number one, for those of you who don't know, Japan. Japan is the largest creditor. Who is the second largest? Answer: the People's Republic of China. And you know what that means? That means that every year Uncle Sam has to take taxes from you and me, and we mail that in, and he takes the money, Uncle Sam does. Does he use it for the United States? Not at all. He has to pay interest. He has to send a check for billions and billions of dollars to China, which can use it for whatever they want, like, I don't know, building their military. You understand? The United States debt is already a dangerous burden, and it has become more so. It's, you have to understand, if the Chinese tomorrow decided they don't want to hold the dollar debt, what they would do is they would sell all of the treasury bonds that they purchased as a way of lending to the US government. If the price of treasury bonds goes down, the interest rate goes up. They could overnight in China drive the interest rate in this country way higher than it is now. And you want to see a crippled economy? Watch. Nobody will be able to afford a car because they can't meet the payments, or a house because they can't meet the mortgage, or a college education because they can't borrow their. I mean, we are in a place of economic crisis, and only because we have two political parties that pretend everything is okay, or like Trump, I'll fix it. No, you won't. It's beyond fixing. And you don't dare tell the American people how bad it is. You just don't dare. So Kamala Harris didn't dare, and he didn't dare.
Are you worried that this could go into a Great Depression eventually?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
in 1929, when we had the last Great Depression, it came right after what were called the Roaring Twenties in this country. A booming, prosperous time, and everybody thought, oh, good, our economy's great. But meanwhile, underneath the surface, all the conditions were ripening for the explosion. That's what we have now. Look, here's a statistic for you to think about. The level of debt of the United States government is higher than it has ever been in this country's history.
Right.
The level of debt of businesses, corporations, is higher today than it has ever been in American history. And the level of debt of households is about to hit a new record. It's not quite there yet, but just shy of it.
So how do people get prepared for this? Because if there's a depression, there's bank runs. This is not a joke. This is legit.
Yeah, the first thing is, I'm going to give you the same answer that Alcoholics Anonymous gives to people who have a drinking problem. The first thing you got to do is you got to get up at a meeting and you got to say, hello, my name is Bill. I'm an alcoholic. And the reason they make you do that is you can't solve a problem until you admit you have it. And if you keep saying, no, I'm just a social drinker, I just have a couple of beers like they can't help you because you are busy. You and I, as American citizens, I was born in Ohio. I have lived and worked in the United States all my life. I'm speaking to you now from New York. I can assure you, this is, and I'm not the only one. You can see my hair is gray. I've been around a while. This is the worst condition of the American economy in my lifetime. And my left-wing colleagues, my right-wing colleagues, and my colleagues in the middle, we don't agree on how we got into this situation, and we don't agree on how to get out. But here's what we agree on. This is the worst condition of the economy in our lifetimes. And we all are amazed that we all agree on that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, it is really scary because this is happening. I want to get into the last two questions. These are audience questions. Just bringing up, and again, for people listening, before we get into the questions, this is Professor Richard Wolff. He is like a doctor, like a PhD, the way he talks to us because he tells the truth. But again, it is Professor Richard Wolff. It is Richard D. Wolff on YouTube, rdwolf.com, the new book out, Understanding Capitalism. Definitely get that on your local bookstores. We push first, and then Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million, or if you have to, go to Amazon lastly. Let's talk about these last two questions. So, bringing up the BRICS, these countries are coming together. This is China, this is Russia, this is a lot of countries in Africa. We're seeing the youngest populations are in countries in Africa. Africa is on the rise as far as that goes. Are you worried about the BRICS really taking over and all these big countries? This is like a global domination eventually, where they're going to take over and we're going to be using the BRICS and not the US dollar, because it looks like the US dollar is about to fail due to, the information you alluded to throughout this conversation, Professor Wolff.
The basic short answer to your question is it's worse than you think. It's already the reality. It's not that it's getting there. It's already. Let me go over. About 10 or 12 years ago, the BRICS began. It was 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. 5 countries. The initials BRICS, the first letter of each of those countries' names.
Right.
Okay, that's the BRICS. Then about a year or two ago, 6 more countries joined them. So then it became 11 countries. And a month ago in Kazan, a city in Russia, 13 more countries joined them. So you now have 5 plus 6 plus 13, do the math, 24, 25 countries. Okay. Let me give you an idea of how this has changed the whole world economy. First, those 25 countries in the BRICS together account for more than half the population of this planet, over 50%. The United States' population is 4.5% of the world's people. So the BRICS is 50 plus percent, and the United States is 4.5%. That's not a contest. That's over. They're the majority. We are not. We are a small minority. Now let's look at the United States with its allies. The major allies of the United States are called the G7. It's the United States plus Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. That used to be the number one block of countries in the world economy. But together today, if you add up all of the output, the value of a year's production in the G7, it's less, significantly less than the added up total production of the BRICS. So they are now the number one. We are the number 2. Let me drive this home to you. Every significant corporation in the world, both American and non-American, is now readjusting itself to a new world economy. They're realizing that the BRICS is the bigger market. The BRICS is the bigger source of your oil, your gas, your rare earths, your metals, that's where the world is. That's where the market is growing fastest. The future of economic well-being is over there, not with us. We're having to catch up. I'll give you one example that people can relate to. The whole world is shifting right now from gas-powered vehicles to electric vehicles here in the United States and everywhere else. And that's because of pollution, of climate change, and all of that stuff. Okay, Starting about 15 years ago, automobile companies around the world, American and foreign, entered into a competitive race who could produce the highest quality, lowest cost electric car and electric truck. Okay? That competition has now been resolved. There have been winners, as there always are in competition, and there have been losers. Let me tell you who the winner is. It's the BYD Corporation. B is in boy, Y is in yellow, D is in dog. If you've never heard of the BYD Corporation, that's because the world has changed. That is a Chinese corporation located in China. They have produced by far the highest quality electric vehicle at the lowest price. Okay?
Okay.
General Motors lost that competition. Ford Motor Company lost the competition. Tesla Motor Company lost the competition. BYD won the competition. Now, first of all, you're an American, I'm an American, but I'll bet you 99% of Americans never heard of the BYD Corporation. That's already a sign you are not where the action is. It's over there. Okay? If you go to Europe today, you will see on the roads and highways of Europe lots of BYD cars because people in Europe are buying them. But if you go to the United States, you won't see one. Why not? Because Mr. Trump put a tariff on them, and Mr. Biden raised the tariff. It's now 100%. Here's what that means. If you wanted to buy a BYD car, you'd have to go to a dealer here in the United States. You'd have to give him 30,000 bucks to get the car shipped from China. And then 100%, you'd have to give another 30,000 to Uncle Sam as the tariff, the tax on that import. That would make the car cost you 60 grand. But you can get an inferior electric car from GM or Ford, and you'd only have to pay 45.
Right.
But now
Yeah.
hear me out. If you get this, you'll understand the next 10 years of America's decline. Every competitor of the United States outside, in Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, is able to buy BYD cars for 30 grand. But every American company that has to buy electric vehicles can't get that. They will pay 45,000 for an inferior vehicle. You know what that means? They're going to lose the competition. They're going to have to raise their prices compared to somebody getting a better car for less money. This is going to mean trouble for American business. This is going to eat away the profits. It's going to mean layoffs. We're facing a situation where we're pretending we're tough and powerful and we can get through it, but we can't. So eventually Americans will have to get off the pot and realize you got to sit down with the Chinese and work something out because you're losing, Jack.
Yeah.
All the rest is pretense.
So, Professor Wolff, let's end with this. I mean, we've talked a lot about doom and gloom. Unfortunately, the doom and gloom has been truth.
Yeah.
That's the unfortunate part about this. But can you leave the audience with a little bit of hope? Any
Yes.
kind of hope, I guess.
Yes. Yes. And that hope comes from American history. When we were once at the beginning, we were a colony of Great Britain, and we wanted to be independent. We wanted to break away. We didn't want to be loyal to King George III sitting in London. We wanted independence. And the British said, no, you can't have it. We're going to decide. Remember, we got the tea in the Boston Harbor and threw it in the water, the Tea Party to protest and all that. The British decided, oh, we can take care of this. We'll send troops. And we had a war, the War of Independence. 1774, 5, and 6. To the surprise of everyone, the British lost. In 1812, they tried again, and again they lost, right? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and all of those people won. After that, the British understood you can't stop history. Your war ain't going to do it. So the British worked out a deal with the United States how we would organize the world economy to let the British Empire be where it was and to let the Americans not only have the United States, but if you remember something called the Monroe Doctrine, which happened out of that period, Latin America became kind of where the United States would have priority. Okay. I don't like that arrangement. I don't believe in that kind of carving up the world, but I understand that we didn't have any more wars with Britain ever again. So here's the way out. Sit down with China. The United States remains a big, rich economy. We have a lot of value to the rest of the world. Let's trade on that value. Let's say, okay, you can grow. You, the Chinese, have every right to aspire to be a rich and powerful country, just as we did. We don't want to go to war with you. Everybody now has nuclear weapons, and that's the end of us anyway. So let's sit down and work something out. Don't throw tariff wars and trade wars. Don't put your fleet in the South China Sea. Don't fight a dead-end war in Ukraine. Stop it.
Right.
The war doesn't solve your problem. And therefore, there is a way out. But it requires, because the Chinese have said, we'll sit down and work it out. It requires the American people and the American government to come to the realization you can't bluff and you can't bully and you can't act the way you do. It's going to hurt the economy. It already is, and it's not solving your problem. China is growing faster than the United States. It's been doing it for 30 years. It's scheduled to do it this year and next year and the year after. Time is on their side, not our side. That has to be understood. Then I think we could work out a resolution that lets everybody live and grow.
And the only way for us to grow out of this economic crisis, we would have to grow at 5%, correct?
That's right. That's right. And we're not even reproducing our population. One of the few ways we could grow, get ready for it, is with immigrants. Yeah. And we're kicking them out. This is called shooting yourself in the foot.
All right. Well, Professor Wolff, thanks so much for coming on again. Professor Richard Wolff. It is Richard D. Wolff on YouTube, rdwolff.com, and then the new book, Understanding Capitalism. Professor Wolff, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for bringing such great information to people listening.
And thank you for having a program that dares to talk honestly about these issues,